What's up, sports fans? My name is Lucas Weiss, host of the Weesesports Chronicles podcast. We got a great episode for you today. We have a returning guest. He is Ro Russell. He is the founder of Grassroots Elite and the head basketball coach of Crestwood Preparatory High School in Toronto. In this episode, I chat with Ro about Black History Month and the initiatives that he's doing to teach Black history to not only his players, but people in his school and people across the country participating in basketball through Grassroots Elite. We have an honest conversation about what Black History Month means to Ro, how the values and principles of Black History Month could continue past February, and we also chat about allyship and the importance of white people in sports and in media to be allies for the Black community, not just in February, but all 12 months of the year. So a fantastic conversation with Ro Russell. You're not going to want to miss it. As always, the Weesports Chronicles podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So make sure to like, rate, watch, and subscribe to all three of those channels. Now, without further ado, let's get to today's episode with Ro Russell on the Weesports Chronicles podcast. Okay. All right, let's head off the top. You may know him. He's a basketball coach. He's one of my favorite guests on the Weesports Chronicles podcast. He is Ro Russell. Ro, great to have you on again, my man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Good to be on the show again and share my thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it's Black History Month, and we're doing a lot of different episodes here on the Weesports Chronicles podcast to celebrate Black History Month. So I know that we've had you on before, Ro, to share your story, and you could take this question in any direction possible. But what does Black History Month mean for you?
Me, it's very obviously very important because, first of all, that's my skin color, that's my race, that's my culture, that's my ethnicity, and I want them to understand, and that for hundreds of years there was no Black History Month. No, it was out of the history books, out of the school textbooks. It wasn't nationally archived. It just went by the wayside. People didn't focus on the plight that we had to make from that they took us and brought us in slavery 400 or 500 years ago. All the Black historical efforts and achievements that we made, and and also to empower Black kids for the future, so that doesn't happen again. And a lot of people don't really understand or know about Black Canadian history, both in the sports world, innovation and inventions, and just naturally. So I thought it was a pretty good thing that, first they had Black History Day, then they had Black History Week, and then now they have Black History Month. So at least we get a month where we can kind of portray what we've done and what we've been through and where we're going. So it's pretty important to me, and it's important for the next generation to understand, when they look up at role models and people that gone through all the craziness they had to go through with all the racism and segregation and everything, they were able to fight through it and become great. So they can also do it. So it's very important to me.
Well, absolutely. And I think you make a very good point about the importance of Black Canadian history, because I know for me, growing up in school, we talked about the settlers coming from Europe, predominantly white, to Canada. A lot of the focus was on Indigenous Aboriginal history. And it just felt like, for me growing up, that I certainly wanted to learn about all types of history, but it was just very focused on one particular avenue for Canadian history. And then I think growing up, you see a lot of Black Canadians, Black Canadian athletes like Donovan Bailey, for example, and most recently a lot of Canadian basketball players that you've worked with, RJ Barrett, Corey Joseph, many, many more. And I just think it's so important that look, that we need to talk about it and that we need to learn, because I just think it makes my job as a storyteller so much more important, that we know the history so that we can tell better stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, uh, people just don't know. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't know that while slaves were brought to America and built the White House and the better part of the country in the States, they brought slaves to Halifax, to Nova Scotia, and they built most of what we now know as Halifax and North Preston and all that stuff. And they assisted with the Underground Railroad and all that stuff. So Canadian Black history is very, very important and dear to us in regards to development of Canadian history. It is history, but it's like it's pushed to the side. So we're trying to highlight it, trying to celebrate it, trying to acknowledge it, and educate folks about it, because like you said, it was, the emphasis was on the early settlers and the historical stuff in terms of the political, the British, the Americans, all that stuff. But there were Black folks in the War of 1812
Yeah.
that helped Canada basically beat the Americans. So we need to know all that stuff.
Absolutely. And look, Ro, I mean, you're someone that has for such a large part of your life, given back to the community, giving Black people an opportunity through sports. And I'm just curious for you, when you were, you're obviously at Crestwood right now, but was there like a bit of, I don't know, resistance, if you will, to sort of, talk about Black History Month? Because again, I mean, I'm a few years removed from the education system, and again, it was very predominantly focused on sort of one avenue. And for you, I guess, did you sense that, like, it was a little bit of a barrier to try to talk about Black History Month, or when you first got into, let's say, basketball or whatnot?
Yes, definitely. I was always that guy that was asking those questions, like, what about Black folks? Black folks obviously been around for centuries. Where did they get their start? What's their history? Who are the Black inventors, the Black politician, the first Black into the NBA? What's all that information? So I was that guy that when Google did eventually come around, that I start to Google stuff and educate myself, and then start to tell my friends, tell the players, have trivia about it, and really educate people about it. I'd be part of the Black History Club and the Black Club and all those things to try to bring about change and education on that topic.
And then when did you, I guess, experience sort of a shift? I mean, obviously, I know that last summer with, the murder of George Floyd and the anti-Black racism protests, it certainly took a real rapid increase in terms of the attention, the rightful attention towards Black history and issues of anti-Black racism. But when did you start to see a shift that, like, okay, these institutions are starting to pay attention to this, and like it's really important that the rest of society do so?
Yeah, I'd say about maybe 2010. I'm on the board of directors on this Black advocacy group called Anchor, and I started to do research, and we started to get into it and lay claim and talk about the issues and systemic racism and police brutality and all those things. And so I think it was 2010 that I started to see people addressing those issues. To start in America, a lot of stuff was happening with police brutality and all those things, but we were still paving the way, still stepping up, and still going forward. And it came to a head, obviously, last year with George Floyd, and now it's something that people have to address and become either allies of it, or really step up and be doing something about it. In 1995, Jean Augustine, she was the first Black politician in Canada. She started that program that Black History Month in Canada, and little was done about it from a national scale, and so now it's great that it's come to the forefront of everything now because it's very important. Like we did some stuff, what I mean? Like some stuff happens with us, and it should be recognized, should be celebrated. We're not trying to say we're extra or better, but we're saying we matter too. You know what I'm saying? Our history is part of Canadian, North American, American history. So it should be talked about. It should be, celebrated. And we did some pretty good things on the sports world, inventions, all those different things. Black folks have done some stuff. So I think that, we got to make something positive come out of George Floyd dying to people to talk about it and to now, really celebrate it and make it a part of the curriculum and part of society because we're here. We got brought here, so we're here now. So let's do something about it.
Well, I think you make a really great point because Jalen Rose said something last year that I think really stuck with me. And he said, if we love Black people like we love Black culture, the world will be a better place. Because I think look, a lot of, the sports media world, let's just take that world for an example. It's predominantly white, and we're covering predominantly Black athletes, especially in basketball. And I think we like to celebrate those accomplishments because it's like cool, because it's Black culture, right? Whether it's basketball, hip hop, music, that's very trendy. But then for the other stuff, we sort of then just shuffle that to the side because it's maybe too difficult to talk about. Maybe it's uncomfortable to talk about for some people. So I think you make a really great point that look, this needs to be addressed because it is part of Canada, and we we shouldn't just take advantage of, RJ Barrett's great athleticism and not talk about his ancestral roots, right? Or The Weeknd, for example, who just performed in the Super Bowl halftime show. Well, he's a great musician, but why? I mean, we should also talk about where his ancestors came from. So I think it's very important to not only appreciate Black culture, but in order to do that, talk about Black history.
Absolutely, they go hand in hand because they're a cornerstone of America, of Canada, and we need to celebrate it. We need to be part of the curriculum. Like every school, the same way they have 20th century Canadian history, they should have 20th century Canadian Black history. You know what I'm saying? I think that should be part of the curriculum for people to understand it because there's a lot of people, both white and Black, that don't even know the history unless they were to actually do research on it like I've done and really say, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that Elijah McCoy, a Canadian Black history guy, the real McCoy derived from him because he was the one that was like the person that said, oh, this is legit. This is legit. This is the dud. This is no good. This is the real McCoy, and he was responsible for helping to build the railroads from all the way from the Pacific Ocean to Atlantic Ocean and all the parts and the oil and all that stuff. And he was the one where they checked with him because he started from when he was a kid, building railroads and all that stuff to say this is legit or this is not legit. There's a lot of things that people don't know about what we had to go through. Like we have our own Rosa Parks, Viola Davis, she decided that she was going to sit in the front row of the theater, you know what I'm saying? And like anybody else, and rather than upstairs where the Black folks had to sit back in the day in Nova Scotia. And so she had to go through the whole nine of being arrested, put in jail, going to trial, and all that stuff. And now she's on the Canadian staff, because of her stance against, human rights and civil rights, and dignity and so forth. So there's so much things that all we have to do is Google it. All you have to do is take a class in it. All you got to do is be in a club at school with it, and you'll find out all these things that Black folks did as well. because our whole life has been finding out what the white folks have done. You know, they've done great things, wonderful things, but they're not the only people in the world. You know what I'm saying? And we've done some pretty good things as well.
You mentioned earlier about allyship, and I think that concept has certainly been talked about over the last year. Very important, and I think in Black History Month, you sort of see sometimes the quote unquote fake allies come out, because obviously it's a big month and a lot of people are talking about it, but then past February, then silence. So I know I've asked you this before on previous podcasts, but I'll ask you again: is because I think it's important for Black people and Black voices in sports and sports media to talk about successes of Black people. But I also think that it's even more important that white people do as well to show allyship. So how is this concept of allyship achieved? Because it's not like a simple flip of the switch, oh, I'm an ally. This is a 365-day process that takes time to develop and achieve.
Yeah, I think that each ally has to be able to say, I support and I'll continue to support. You know, I understand where you've coming from. I've seen it's pretty glaring that there's systemic racism, there's injustice, social injustice, there's police brutality. Be real with oneself and say, based on what I see, I support you. You know, and then you're part of a group, you're part of an advocacy, you're part of, allowing the change to start, and then you're continuing to do that as you go into it, in terms of stepping up. Like if you see someone say something or do something, you need to step up and say something, and not just keep it behind, on the closed doors and say, okay, it wasn't me, I didn't do anything. I'm a supporter, I'm an ally, but to actually stand up for it because it's wrong. The same way if we saw something was wrong, we would say something or do something about it. It's the same thing. So it's support and continued support.
So true. And I think that oftentimes that concept of vocals and verbal support, sometimes it's easier said than done, right? Like you could say, oh, I'm going to verbally support you. But then when someone launches a racist attack or makes some, off-color comment or perpetuates the systemic racism problem, people sometimes just shy away. Like, oh, I don't want to be involved in this. I'm too uncomfortable. It doesn't affect me, so why am I going to be involved? And I think that's where it needs to really change, is that whether it's on a social media platform, whether that's in a workplace setting, just being there for someone, like you're there for your mom or dad or your brother or sister, because I think that shows that, like, look, you're really serious about being an ally. And I also think maybe, Rowan, you can maybe speak on this as well, just being willing to learn too, because I know for me, I've had a lot of reflection as well over the past year, and I think being willing to reach out and be willing to learn, I think, is also an important step to achieving allyship.
Yeah, definitely. I think the way you're supporting it now by having this dialogue on your show about Black History Month and about Canadian Black History Month is very commendable, because you're showing that you're supporting. So those using your platform and not being always entitled and having that privilege all the time to say, hey, I'm good, I want to help you as well. I'm going to step up. I'm going to be that person that made that change. And there's terrific people in America, in Canada, all over the world that have done that. And we need to look at those people and say, hey, man, I need to have that bravery and that courage that person had to go beyond myself, even though I can get scrutinized in certain areas, to step up and say, no, that's wrong. We need to bring a change. And that's what he's done. Like, we've seen that happen in America, right? With Joe Biden, how he's had the most diverse cabinet in the history of politics, and having a Black Indian vice president, and all those things, and just changing the laws according to that, and bringing about that change. So someone that's having that courage and that bravery to say, enough is enough. Okay, we got to change this. This is not right. You know, it should be based on your qualifications and your heart and your skill and so forth, not the color of your skin.
I want to shift the discussion maybe to Canadian basketball, and of course, you spent many years involved in Canadian basketball, whether that's through Grassroots Elite and now Crestwood. And I'm just sort of curious, Ro, your perspective on how opportunities for Black people in more executive positions, coaching positions, has changed, and maybe
Oh,
how has it changed?
don't get me started. But back in the day when I was a high school kid, the national team was all white.
Yeah,
You know, the coaching staff was all white. The all the way to the manager to the trainer, everybody was white. There was no attempt to even look at that issue and say, wait a second, these are the best players that we can find. These are the best coaches we could find. And eventually, slowly but surely, a change happened. Now, when you do look at the national team, it's mostly Black with some sprinkle of white, and now it's slowly becoming more diversified. They're not just looking at just my friend and my boy and the old boys clique. Now they're searching out and looking and giving people a chance to be considered both as players, as coaches, and from the staff perspective. So it's changed a lot. Rowan Barrett has a lot to do with it since he came on board, him and Steve Nash, because Steve is he's one of the biggest advocacies and allies there is right now. Like if you look at Steve Nash's Instagram, he has a photo of George Floyd on there. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
that really stuck to him. That really struck him to the core, where he's not afraid to stand up and say something about it. You know what I'm saying? Because he played his whole career with brothers. You know what I'm saying? So
sure.
he doesn't look at color or anything or race. He just looks at who's the best man. Let's catch this alley oop. Let's catch this pass because I can deliver it. You know what I'm saying? So I commend him for his work and his mentality and everything in terms of how we're doing to change all this. And it's been a big difference from when it first started, where everything was like, you know what I'm saying, just whitewashed, to now everything's diverse and given a chance for everybody. So it's been good in that way. We should even look back and have some right now Steve Nash is like, probably when you say Canadian basketball, you say Steve Nash.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's great, and that should always be there. But if I'm a young Black man, Black boy looking up, and trying to get there and hope and dream and pray, I gotta have some role models and some sports figures, the same way America does with Michael Jordan and LeBron and Larry Bird and all these people. A young boy, Black, white, whatever, I gotta look up and say, okay, I want to be like him. But we don't even know what that person is in Canada. Like if you ask a kid, nine out of 10 kids won't even know that Stuart Granger is the first Black Canadian that got drafted in the NBA.
Yeah.
Back in 83, 84. A lot of people don't know that. We should know who the first is. The same way we talk about Jackie Robinson and Hank Aaron and all these figures and everything, who was the first. We got to know who's the icon, who's the person we look up to. Is it Andrew Wiggins? Is it R.J. Barrett? Is it Jamal McGlure? Is it, whoever it is? And we need to, look at some people as role models that say, one day I want to be like you. You know what I'm saying, as well, because I can identify with you. Sure, Steve Nash is great, and he's a great ally, and he was a two-time NBA champion and all that great stuff. But you also need to know who the Black people were, like in hockey. Willie O'Reilly, first Black Canadian hockey player in the NHL. And you got to know all these things, whether it be Donovan Bailey or even Ben Johnson, like even though he's been, said that he took steroids and everything, he still, at one point was the fastest man in the world. So you got to acknowledge that. I'm not going to throw him to the side and say, oh, he's Jamaican, whatever. He's still Canadian. You know what I mean? He's still, won some things for Canada. So we got to do more research and more talk about who the Canadians were, who invented stuff, who were the first, who helped to bring about certain things that we hold dear now. So we got to keep on talking. So we got to utilize this month as much as possible.
Well, I think it speaks to the need for the leagues, the media companies as well through Black History Month to educate people. And I think you make the great point of Black people finding their sort of idol or role model in order to get inspired. I mean, and look, I don't think it necessarily needs to be, someone doesn't necessarily need to win multiple championships or MVPs to be that guy. They just need to be noticed. They need their story told in order to be that guy. And I think it's up to the leagues, the media companies, or the schools, the advocacy groups, the grassroots elites of the world to be able to tell those stories. And I think just not in Black History Month, but make an effort for the whole year to make sure.
For the whole year, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the next focus, is to start with, we started in January with Martin Luther King weekend. And then in February, we went to the whole Black History Month. And then for the rest of the year, let's talk about it, because we talk about everything else. I saw on Twitter, one guy was upset that there's a Black History Month. He's like, why do Black people get their own month? I'm like, can we have one month? Because before, white folks had all 12. So can we get one to recognize what we've done? Like, he doesn't even get it. The guy doesn't even get it. He wasn't, because he's so privileged and so natural about it. Everything comes so naturally about everything else, and he doesn't get that. Everything else is already, white folks already get 12 months a year. So can we get one, to identify, celebrate, and talk about, especially what we had to go through 500 years ago, and what we had to do both in America and in Canada, and how we fought through all that. And now we're moving ahead to make it a better place for everybody.
You obviously coach basketball, have coached a lot of different players, some of the, rising Canadian stars, but you also teach them to be, better people, and teach them values and principles that they can take beyond the basketball court. I'm just curious, Ro, how you interweave Black History Month, or not just in February, but the whole year in terms of the players that you coach and develop.
I'm always talking to them about, this person had to go through all this to get where they got to. Look what they had to overcome. Look at all the racism they had to deal with in the South, and in the Civil War, and in slavery and all that stuff. And they were able to still be inventors and politicians and all these great things. Look what you are in the day where, we have civil rights, we have the human rights. It's not as bad as it used to be. So you could do it. Let's you be the first. You be that person that gets to that level. And I'm always inspiring them and motivating them using the past as part of it. So it's about mentorship. It's about motivation and inspiration, and you get them through it. To when they have those tough days, and things are going tough for them, say, hey, look what those people had to go through. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I do all the time.
How's the team doing these days? I know it's difficult right now.
It's very, very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult. We can train, we can practice, we can scrimmage a little, but with the stay-at-home orders and the restrictions and all the color codes and everything with this pandemic, it's been very tough. We haven't been able to play the game. We're trying to go to the States. We can't go to the States. All these restrictions about going into these hotels and paying over $2,000 to wait, and all these crazy things it's essential for us. They should add, scholarships as essential, because some of our guys can't afford to pay all these exorbitant amount of money to go to Canadian universities and American universities. So they need those scholarships. And to get scholarships, you need exposure, you need competition, you need film, you need some kind of activity to keep them going and keep them mentally health. The mental health part is a huge part
Yeah.
of it. Like our guys are in a tough spot right now because their whole life they've played, and now they haven't played in a year and a half or whatever it's been. So it's tough, but you got to keep on going. Like, hey, we're planning ahead, we're moving forward, we're in the gym here, we're in the gym there. It's gonna get better, and keep them sane. You know what I'm saying? Sane
Yeah.
and help them to get to that place. It makes my job harder because I'm on the phones every day talking to these coaches, trying to convince them to take these kids without seeing them, without coming up and seeing them play, without seeing video of them, all that stuff. It's been hard. It's been really hard, but just like anything else, we'll get through it. We have no choice but to get through it.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, physical aspect is one thing, learning about the physical side of basketball, but the mental side is so important too. And I think if you could get through this, I mean, I think you could get through anything, right?
Anything.
It's a
We've
tough
had
time
to
for
get
everyone.
through the influenza. We had to get to the Black Plague. We had to get to all the different things over the history of time. So this is another thing that we gotta, get to and cope with and adjust and live with. So it is what it is. We have to accept it, and it's the new norm.
I want to end, Ro, with just looking ahead. I mean, past February, and obviously it'll be, in a few months, the 1 year anniversary since George Floyd's murder and all the anti-black racism protests that resulted. And I'm just curious, Ro, from you. I mean, you're very involved, here in Canada with Canadian basketball and in high school basketball. What's sort of one or two things that you'd like to see just keep going, in terms of ensuring that the values and the principles and the knowledge of Black History Month continue going forward, beyond the month of February?
I think the biggest thing that needs to happen is from the top.
Yeah.
Before, the politicians were saying that there isn't systemic racism in Canada. You know what I'm saying? Which is crazy. And also from the police aspect, there needs to be a change and some change of heart in regards to police brutality. I think those are the two biggest things because it irks me when I see the videos of
Yeah.
how they act towards Black folks that have their hands up, that have no weapons, that are fighting for their rights. People are saying, hey, I don't have to give you my ID. Then they shoot them because
Yeah.
you're resisting arrest. And, in the schools and in the workplace and all over, the systemic racism that happens. So, those walls need to come down. Once those walls come down, then we can rise up. You know what I'm saying? So it's a matter of time. It's slowly but surely, and we have to have hope, and we have to work together. And it's great to have allies such as yourself and other people, Steve Nash, and other people that see it and want to help bring a change, and they're going to say something about it. Even with the consequences that come with it. Those are the two things I come to mind off the bat that I like to see changes for: systemic racism and police brutality. Because it's really it's holding the Black folks down,
Mm.
and we just tired of always fighting all the time. We need some breaks. We need some relief. We need some time to give us a chance as well.
Well, it's a burden. It feels like a 365-day burden just to be Black, which it shouldn't be, right? Like,
Yeah,
it isn't for the case for white people. I mean, we don't have that burden every day when we go out into the community or into stores and whatnot. But like, for it to be a Black person, for some it can feel like a crime just because of the color
yeah,
of their skin, and that's terrible.
absolutely. I go into a store to buy something, and immediately they either send someone to follow me or someone's
Yeah,
looking all over to see if I'm taking anything.
yeah.
I got money too. I'm a good person too. I just want to
Mm.
do the right thing. So, why? Just because I'm Black?
Yeah.
It's not because I've past history of my pictures up on the wall or they know who I am. That's different. But just because I'm Black, it shouldn't mean that I'm something different.
Yeah.
I'm human as well. We're human as well, and so that's how it should be in all aspects of life.
You mentioned how, younger black people now are trying to find their role model. I'm curious for my last question, who was your role model growing up? I mean, who was someone that you like looked up to in the black community that inspired you or mentored you? And I'll use this platform right now for you to just talk about that.
I have a bunch of them. Paul Jones, he was one of my first mentors when I started this basketball journey,
Yeah.
and he was a principal at Arlington High School, Middle School. Dorn Major played with the Argonauts. He's from America, and he saw something special in me, and he always was there to lend an ear and talk about things and give advice. David Joseph, Corey and DeVoe Joseph's parents, father. He was a mentor of mine as well. And, there's been a lot of guys that have been mentors of mine. Patrick Shaw, a community guy that's always been a staunch community person. And then overall, the Lord Jesus Christ,
Of course.
he lived in the Middle East. The pictures we see of Jesus with blue eyes and blonde hair isn't true. You know what I'm saying? Jesus Christ was dark skinned.
Yep.
And my mom, my older sister, they've been great mentors of me as well. So it's been, some people don't have those that black role models in their life to look up to inspire them. I've had a lot, both personally and locally, and then overall, whether it be LeBron, whether it be Michael Jordan, whether it be MLK, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, all these guys that you look up to and see, hey, if they can do it, I can do it. They were handed some hard things they had to overcome, and they overcame it. So I have to do the same thing, and not just be another number. I want people to remember Ro Russell. He tried his best to bring about change and to help people, and not to just give up and say, oh, woe is me. It is what it is. It happened. Now let's try to bring some change, and let's help people along the way. So I've been fortunate and blessed by God to have those role models in my life that have helped to shape who I am, that people kind of know who I am, and I've helped a lot of people. So that's a good thing.
Amen to that. Ro Russell, he is the founder of Grassroots Elite. He's the head basketball coach at Crestwood Prep. He's been on this show many times, but always, such a fascinating conversation. And Ro, I really appreciate you coming on the Weesports Chronicles podcast during Black History Month to advance this dialogue. I'm really grateful for the conversation.
Definitely. And I also want to give shout outs to Crestwood Prep, who has become an ally as well. They're looking to have a curriculum, Black History curriculum. They're doing a Black History programming. They've had a lot of things in the school. They become a really good ally for this change, for social injustice and all these things and diversity. So I want to give a shout out to Crestwood Prep for that and their leadership.
Thanks, Ro, and we'll chat again with you soon.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for having me on, and we'll talk soon.